Welcome to another episode of Let's Chat With. Joining me is graphics artist David Lee Conley. David, how are you
Hi,
today?
I'm really well, man. How about yourself?
I'm good. As I
Good.
said
Glad to
before,
hear.
you're a graphics artist. For
Yep.
those who don't know, what is a graphics artist?
Well, it's funny. Graphics artist was kind of a catch-all title that I chose for myself, and so I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit. But I run my own artist small business, and I do a lot of different graphics work, including still graphics, illustration, graphic design, motion graphic. And so I figured that was kind of the best way to encompass all the different disciplines and skill sets that I've kind of gained over the years and been fortunate enough to develop over time. So that's the short of it, I guess.
How does one become a graphics artist?
I think the best way for me to answer that question is to probably just tell you how I did it, and then people can extrapolate their own paths from there. And so, it really, actually, I started off as a photographer back in high school. I was part of our newspaper club organization, whatever you want to call it, and I was, as a lot of high school kids are, kind of directionless. But I was really good friends with the photography editor on our newspaper team, and started going out on shoots for them, mainly actually for sports photography, if you can believe it. And then, of course, the thing that comes after taking the photos is editing them. And so that was my first foray into Photoshop, was through photo editing. This is before Lightroom had really taken off, and Photoshop was still kind of the premier tool to use for photo editing. And so I started using it just for basic color correction, lighting, etc. But of course, I'd seen some friends of mine who had been doing a little more cool things with it, making funny photos, memes, all that stuff back in high school. And I thought it'd be fun for me to learn how to do that as well. And so I moved slowly from photo editing to photo, cutting, cropping, etc. Dumb things high schoolers do, like put someone else's head on someone else's body, like Photoshop things in photos that shouldn't be there, right? And so my joy was trying to make it look as realistic as possible, right? And through that, I learned a lot about just general design principles, how to make things fit in, how to make things flow and mesh. And after I had kind of met that to its logical end, I went into more of creating things from scratch. And so instead of using photos as a base, I just started from zero. And throughout high school and throughout college, that was kind of my side hobby. Was I would make T-shirts for my friends, I would make posters for clubs that I was in college, and I majored in computer science, and so I wasn't really doing any design work in my schooling. And so I decided, this was my way to, after school was done, to have some fun, right? In addition, of course, to like video games and all that. And over time, as I did that more professionally in my work, and as it kind of blended into my professional life, I think that's where it really started to evolve into what you see now, where I do a whole bunch of different disciplines. I think if I had to give one thing that really helped me along the way, was just having a curious brain for a lot of this stuff. I looked at a lot of really cool things. I got really fascinated by movies, animation, and then down to even advertisements. And I was like, how do I make that? How do I do things like that? How would I be as cool as these people? And that kind of led me down a whole bunch of different rabbit holes on YouTube and Skillshare and all those things. And over time, I just kind of accumulated a lot. And of course, had a lot of experience doing, and here we are. That's kind of the rest of the owl explanation, but that's at least how I started. And then from there, people can, explore how they want.
You create non-typical travel adventure posters. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So I really, really love just advertisement based illustrations, and especially for environment work. I've always been, again, my basis in photography led me to a lot of really cool sights and scenery. And so that's always been my joy. I've also not so secretly had trouble drawing characters for most of my life, right? It's always been like things that are kind of naturally chaotic, like environments. And I also grew up in Southern California, and Disneyland is right there. And so in Disneyland, when you walk in, for those of you who don't know, there's lots of like posters for the attractions within the park that are really stylized and look super cool. And I always liked looking at those before I went in. And so I've always had this kind of affinity towards destination posters, travel posters, etc., especially with my graphic design background. And so I really thought it'd be cool. And this is not a novel idea, but when I thought it was at the time, I thought it'd be cool to make travel posters for fantasy locations, because huge gamer, huge anime guy, huge just geek nerd growing up. And so instead of the real life places, which I still love, right, I thought it'd be funny and really cool actually to dive into the fantasy worlds through a design lens and through an artistic lens, right? Because people have spent so much time and care crafting these really beautiful worlds and games, movies, etc. I thought it'd be cool to represent them in a way that would make people want to go there either for the first time or again. And that's where the idea came from. And here we are.
What are some of the locations?
I started off with stuff that I knew really well, and stuff that I really, really kind of had a strong affinity towards when I was playing growing up and even at the current time. So my first ever travel poster that I ever made was for the Lost Woods from the Legend of Zelda series. It was kind of an amalgamation. I just finished Breath of the Wild at that point, right? And it kind of played through that all. And so I wanted to make it kind of similar similar to that. But as you'll find with a lot of my work, I try to have my work be inspired by rather than obviously carbon copies of the locations within the games and movies. And so Lost Woods is one of those where it's kind of an amalgamation of different Zelda games and combining them into my own aesthetic. But from there, I went on to some of my other favorites like Kingdom Hearts. I have like Hollow Bastion, Twilight Town, Destiny Islands, to name them. I have stuff from Star Wars like Tatooine, Coruscant, Naboo. I have things from Arcane, from Hollow Knight, from what are some other ones from God of War, things along those lines, and like Avatar: Last Airbender. And so lots of a variety, I think, but a lot of things. I think when people approach me at cons and on Etsy, they love the nostalgia that a lot of these places bring. I think it takes a while for a lot of these locations to really sink in as being visitable, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. I really love that, a lot of my posters reference older and kind of more beloved in the general zeitgeist games, and it kind of brings people back in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of really nice and strong and positive reactions to locations I've chosen, and so it brings me a lot of joy.
Also, you create isometric posters. What are they?
Yeah, so the isometric posters, it's interesting. Those were when I started getting a little bored, as artists do, of doing kind of a similar style over and over again. I did a little experiment with isometric based work, and isometric based work, it's hard to describe. I've tried to describe it to people, but it's almost like a 2.5D perspective where you're looking at it from if you imagine like a cube, you're looking at, if this is like the top of the cube, right? You're looking at it from this angle here. So regularly you look at here and it's kind of tilted. And I like isometric because it kind of gives you a unique, almost top-down view of certain places. And so I thought it'd be cool, in a vein similar to my travel posters, right, to take things from an isometric perspective and just a little snapshot of a level, a moment in the movie, a moment in the game, etc., that I thought was really cool, and just almost have it. People call it like my snow globe collection, which is hilarious. It's almost like you're looking at a snow globe. And like, for example, I made one for Bob-omb Battlefield from Super Mario 64, and it was fun to, within the constraints of that perspective, just recreate that world in almost like a diorama type of style. And I haven't done a lot of isometric stuff recently, but I really do. I want to go back to it at some point, especially with all I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years since I've made my last one. I think it'd be really fun.
What's your most popular poster design?
It's Rapture by far. Rapture, there's a funny story behind this. Before I started selling my work back in 2019, my first event was WonderCon in Southern California, which is like the sister event to San Diego Comic-Con, much smaller, but still a really fun event. And in like the 3 or 4 cons I did before COVID hit, I had gotten so many requests for Rapture, which is from BioShock, the video game. I had missed that entire generation of video games because that was right around when I was in late high school, early college, and really through college. And for better and for worse, I didn't want to get stuck on my game console while I was trying to study and trying to do like well in school. And so I kind of had written off at least console games for a while. And so I missed BioShock and all those things. I don't want to say thankfully because that's dismissive, but when COVID hit, all of a sudden a whole bunch of time opened up for me, right? Because I wasn't going into the office anymore. I was at home. I played a lot of sports, couldn't do those anymore, right? And so that allowed me free time to start playing a lot more games again, which was exciting. And so of course I had to see what all the kerfuffle was about BioShock. And so I played through the whole series in the span of about a month, probably, because again, tons of time. And I got it immediately. I was like, oh, I understand. I see why people want to see Rapture in this style, because the Destination style matches so well with Rapture's overall aesthetic. And so in COVID, I created it. And when I came back to shows back in late 2021, it just took way off. And it still remains my most popular work. And it's not particularly close. I've gotten there I have Rainbow Road now, which is, again, like such a wide audience that it kind of does well at all the events. My Avatar pieces were doing really well for a while, especially in COVID when people were rewatching that series again. But still to this day, haven't beat Rapture yet. We'll see if I do. But for now, that is my top seller and my most popular work.
On your website, it says you ship your artwork internationally. Where are some of the places that you've sent your work to?
So if you order actually through Etsy, I pretty much send it anywhere. Etsy is great because they kind of do most of the legwork for you in terms of customs and all the information there. I'm not sure if I've restricted any locations to send to internationally. So if you want something, feel free to go on Etsy and grab it. My website, because it's a little more manual labor, I think I've maybe restricted it to the UK and Canada. I'm not entirely sure. I have to go check that again. But most of my traffic comes through Etsy anyway. So if you want to grab something there, especially if you're an international audience, feel free to go for it. In Canada, right? I'm sure that's a main spot as well as the UK. So
you had a booth at the Artist Alley at Fan Expo 2023 in Toronto, Canada. What was your experience like?
So I love Toronto as a city first and foremost. Of course, I'm saying that from a tourist perspective, and I know it's weird for people from locals to be like, why do you want to come here, right? Because I'm like that with LA. People are like, I love LA, I want to go to LA. I'm like, why? Why would you want to come here? But it's touristy. But I digress. I love Toronto. I love being there. I love visiting there, and I've had such a good experience with the people that come to Fantasco Canada. And I think everyone is so polite, and this is true across most, if not all, shows, but I think particularly in Canada, I know the reputation is just politeness, and it really, I think it comes off in such a strong way. And traveling internationally, especially for commercial stuff, can be challenging, especially when you're on your own as a small business, right? But never have I felt like the reward wasn't worth it in terms, of course, of profits, right? But also in just the people that I meet, like you, right? Like some of the other artists that I've met there, that I would not have been able to meet in domestic United States shows, right? Because they tend to stay local. And just the sheer amount of people that show up at Fantasco Canada is kind of absurd, right? Because in the United States, we have San Diego Comic-Con, we have New York Comic-Con, ECHOCON, etc. But Fantasco Canada, I think, is one of the largest shows in Canada. Am I correct in that?
Yes, it is.
So it is always a joy to come, and just the overwhelming amount of support that I get from people, the amount of people, especially this year, because this was only my second time doing the show, with last year being my first, and the amount of people that came back, right? That be like, oh my gosh, like I saw your work last year, and I wanted to make sure I got some more this time. Or even folks that had seen me on like Sunday last year, for example, where I had sold out of most of my pieces, and they came back for like, I wanted to make sure I came to you this time early before you sold out of stuff. I think as an artist, right, there's nothing quite like that, right? Because especially because art is so subjective, and you never really know who your audience is, or there's a lot of self-doubt that comes into artistry, right? There's a lot of questioning and whether or not it's worth it, whether or not your talent is there up to the level it needs to be. But I think cons, and especially at Fantasco Canada, are a really nice reminder that, no matter what level you are, your work is valued by somebody. And, if you're lucky, it's valued by quite a lot of people. And if you're lucky, even more so, it's enough to support you financially. And I think that's really, really a blessing for me. Very, very fortunate to go, and I'm excited to be there next year, maybe in a bigger booth. And we'll see if they let me.
What were some of the artist reactions to your work?
That's always a joy too. I think it's a different level of what's the word, graciousness that I have for that, right? Because I think people that are in the trenches, right, like in your peers, their compliments and their feedback really means a lot to me, right? Especially as someone who's entirely self-taught. I didn't go to art school. I really haven't had a community of people to learn from and be around until very recently when it comes to my art. And so got a lot of really strong positive reactions to my work from other artists, right? And then of course, there are folks at these events that I really look up to in the way that I'm sure others look up to me, which is weird to say. But to go find people like Chasing Artwork, for example, is a really popular artist in the Toronto region, and I adore his work, right? And to be able to go to him, and last year I purchased his art book, and I've used him as a lot of inspiration for my own pieces this past year, and to kind of learn and grow, and to be able to see him again this year with better work, and to be like, you inspired a lot of this to, your XYZ, your clouds helped me to make these clouds better, etc., was really cool and really gratifying. And so it goes both ways, right? It's really nice to hear people's positive reactions to my work, but also to get to show people how they've influenced me, I think is really, really nice as well. That's one thing about conventions, right? I think the positivity is almost so overwhelming that it's hard not to come out of those events feeling inspired and ready to create again. And so beyond just the financial benefit, it's just nice to be around people that are like you and that are working towards the same goals as you.
Will you be coming back in 2024?
Yes, absolutely. I rebooked my space pretty early on, I think it was on Friday that I rebooked for next year's show. I'm hoping to upgrade. I know the show is super popular, and there's lots of really, really deserving people who are getting the end cap boost, or even like double boost, for example, but would love to expand and continue to expand at this show, right? And as long as it continues to be as positive as it has been these last 2 years, then can't see myself stopping anytime soon. So if you're listening and you're going to be there, look forward to seeing me in about a year from now, because I'll look forward to seeing you.
Where do you see yourself and your artwork in 5 years?
That's a great question. So I hope this isn't too long of an answer. I used to work at the university I graduated at in California, the University of California, Irvine. Did a lot of motion graphics work for them. And actually, I was with them for 8 years before I finally left this past April, right? So right now, I am full-time in the convention scene, selling artwork, as well well as on Etsy, and then freelance gigs, obviously, that I have on the side. And so my goal over the next 5 years or so is to keep doing this, obviously, to grow and expand and to keep on getting into more and more prominent shows like San Diego, New York, for example, are two big ones for me here in the States. To just keep on, I guess, getting my name out there. I would love to establish a good like freelance client base and to keep on creating more locations and things that just keep on getting better and better as I have over these past 5 years. And if I can continue at the rate that I've been going, right, then my ultimate goal is to have enough freelance clients that I don't really have to search too much for work. People can come to me and I'll be kind of a name that people want to work with. And when eventually I can't go to shows anymore for family, for for marriage, things along those lines, that I can still work right from here at this desk, right, and still create and still do the things that I love, while not having to travel so often. And once the initial what's the word I'm looking for, the initial challenges and I guess in logistics of taking care of a kid kind of settle down and they're able to take care of themselves, and maybe I'll jump back in the scene again. I don't want to stop going to shows entirely, like for all the reasons I mentioned before, right? But if I can at least get a freelance stopgap while things get crazy, then I can come back to this and revisit this further down the line. But at least for now, and for now until that 5-year goal, like you mentioned, keep trucking along. I don't know much else, and I'm still figuring out. I'm 5 months into my full-time into the small business, right?
Finally, where can people find more information about you and your artwork? Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, Facebook, website?
Almost all of the above. So I'm mainly on Instagram. That's kind of my main portal for social media. God bless it. I've been trying to get into TikTok and Twitter. I'm not very good at social media. I'm working on getting better. But so I do have an X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, account. I have a TikTok account. But Instagram is my main source of social media, like I said. And then my online storefronts, you can go to free-dlc.com, as well as my Etsy store, which is just free DLC on Etsy. And that's where you can purchase my work. And if you don't want to buy it online, you can see me in person at a lot of shows across the country, but I try to announce where I'm going to be on Instagram. So if you're local to one of the shows, you find me on Instagram, then stop through. I always love, I meet a whole bunch of people, so it's just a great way to keep me in the social and keep my battery high when it comes to this stuff. So it's always great to meet people who've either seen my work or seeing it for the first time. So please stop by. We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you, David, for being on this episode of Let's Chat With.
Of course. Thanks for having me.